Barry Robbins, number 20 on the Rejuvenation Olympics leaderboard.
It wasn't easy.
You founded a cult, the Rice Cult. What's the initiation procedure to that cult?
I think it's a cult of one, mainly just me. But I do think I like the idea. People think cults are crazy, but I do like that. Generally, people in cults are committed to whatever defines the cult. And as far as longevity goes, I feel like diet is by far the most important thing. And the most important choice you can make in diet is like your primary food source. And for me, that's rice, brown rice and white rice and starches in general. But yeah, it's kind of where that came from.
So I've seen your videos a while ago, and you were down at the bottom, I believe. Now it's like down to number 20.
Yeah. So the way they come up with the scores, they average out your top 3 scores, right? And I've taken the test 4 times. And the first time I took the score of the test, I got a 0.78, which is a pretty good score. The second time I took it, I got 1.01. That was because I was trying something different in my approach, and that ended up giving me a worse score. So I kind of reevaluated, and for my third test, I got a 0.73. And then I just got the results for the fourth test, which was 0.72. So when I was with the first 3 scores, with the 1.01 included, I was down in like place number 60 or something. And then once they averaged in the 0.72, then I came up to around number 20.
You kind of identified something very strongly here, right? Because you have excellent scores, right? Like top scores. And then you did something and it's bad. It's a 1.01. And then you changed back. You are onto some strong signal here. So can you tell us your secret?
Yeah. So everything I'm going to share is my opinion, and they're just, my experience. I can't say everything I'm saying is true. It's just, my beliefs, right? But to do well in the Rejuvenation Olympics, you have to do calorie restriction. If you eat in excess of calories, I don't know how you can do well in the test. Like, I mean, what they're measuring is calorie restriction, measuring methylation of your DNA, but that's directly related to calorie restriction. For the test where I got the higher score, I was following, I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, Ray Peat. He's passed on now, but he had a lot of fantastic advice, but he didn't advise restricting calories. And so I ate a higher amount of calories, maybe like around 2,100 calories a day. For my first test, I was down closer to 1,800. And for the last test, I did major amount of calorie restriction. If I was going to give somebody advice, the advice would be, to be competitive, you have to restrict your calories. You have to either restrict your calories or possibly increase your exercise, because exercise in a way does like subtract from your calorie total. So for example, let's say if I ate like Brian Johnson, maybe, 2,100 calories a day, but I did, an hour of exercise intense exercise every morning, the exercise would subtract from my total and kind of get me into calorie restriction mode. Or you could just restrict your calories, right? And do moderate exercise. And so, that's what I do. Like, generally my routine is around 1,800 calories a day. A lot of other things I would add, but I think that's the most important aspect.
I believe Simland talked about that the most correlating factor to these epigenetic aging clocks is inflammation levels.
Yeah.
And that fits into the calorie restriction stuff as well.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, like, so you look pretty small, like 1,900 calories a day. I'm losing weight if I eat 3,500 calories, right?
Yeah. Do you drink coffee?
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's gonna kind of amp up your usage of calories, right?
Yeah, 5%. I believe that's the
Yeah.
number. If you drink like 8 coffee a day, then you get 5%
Yeah.
energy expenditure there, which is
Yeah.
not nothing.
Well, again, like this is all kind of my take, and I wouldn't disagree with Sim Lang because he's a kind of a rock star. I mean, he's does an amazing job, and his videos are fantastic, and he looks fantastic, right? He's also a lot younger, and he's been kind of healthy, like from the very beginning, of his.
How old are you?
I'm 56, and he might still be in his 20s, right? So he does have a lot of advantages in doing this. I mean, he's a very smart guy, and he knew right from the beginning what to do for longevity. But I mean, for me, calorie restriction is very important. The other thing, obviously, you want to reduce your inflammation. I feel like the way to do that is to eat like a starch-based diet, a very low-fat diet. So that's kind of the rice cult thing. That's why I focus on starches.
Starch-based diet. Okay, so you're eating a high carb, low fat, low protein diet, right?
Yeah.
Low fat, I understand that. Low protein. Tell me about that
All right.
choice.
So there was this guy. There was a researcher, and his name was J.P. Ritchie, and he did an experiment. And this was like in the 1980s or 1990s, where he restricted the amount of methionine that he gave to his rats, right? And they had a gigantic extension in lifespan, right? He extended their lifespan. This is one of the most incredible experiments of all time that nobody knows about. He extended their lifespan by 44%, their maximum lifespan, by restricting methionine. So you definitely want to, I mean, I'm taking that and saying, I got to try and restrict protein, and I had to try and restrict fat. And the reason for restricting fat is because when you eat fat, it thickens your blood, and it increases your blood pressure, which increases the work on your heart. It reduces the oxygen flow to your brain. So anything that has fat is going to be counterproductive for longevity. And you're living a long time is basically a battle against heart disease, right? And the amount of fat you eat is going to kind of set you back. And this is like an area where I personally differ with Brian Johnson, because his diet is, he has a lot of fat in his diet. And I think I've seen his numbers for his blood pressure. His blood pressure seems a little bit higher than optimal. And I put that down to the olive oil that he's eating and the huge amount of nuts that he consumes in his diet. And it's going to increase his blood pressure and reduce oxygen flow throughout his body and reduce oxygen flow to his brain. So I don't know how he came up with the idea of higher fat, but again, that my opinion is you should be doing high carb and minimizing fat. But regarding protein, I mean, there's this experiment where the researcher did a low methionine diet, and the rats live 44% longer. That's maximum lifespan. That's gigantic. I mean, there's really no experiment like that where the researcher did not reduce calories. Okay, just reduced an individual amino acid and got a 44% extension in lifespan. I don't know of any other experiment like that. So, so my goal is to try and reduce protein. Now, there's issues with that. Like it's very hard to reduce protein because when you reduce protein, a very easy way to do it would just be eat sugar all day, because sugar doesn't have any protein, right? Or eat fruit. And you can do like a high fruit diet. That's really difficult to do.
Sorry. Why reduce protein? Why not methionine specifically?
Well, it's kind of hard to specifically reduce one amino acid, right? Like this is kind of like an engineered diet that they put together. And, if you cut out animal products, animal products on a percentage basis have more methionine, right? So, eating carbs, it's going to, for the same amount of protein, it's going to have a lower amount of methionine. You definitely want to not consume animal products. But it's hard to just cut out one individual amino acid, right? And the other problem is you still need fiber, right? Like there's no way to be healthy without some minimal amount of fiber. And like I said, I could sit here and eat sugar all day and I wouldn't get any methionine, but I also wouldn't get any fiber, and that would be a terrible approach. So you want to eat foods, you want to minimize your protein to a certain extent, but you still have to have a certain amount of fiber, just because that your body needs fibers to function. Kind of a balancing act between minimizing protein but maximizing a certain amount of fiber. So it's a balancing act. It's not like it's kind of hard to really get the exact perfect diet.
On the fat front, do you have anything against the fish oils? And on the protein front, getting back to Simland, I believe he's big on glycine, and I believe one of his theories is that that's what counteracts the methionine at a high methionine intake.
There is evidence for taurine, that taurine extends life. They did mouse studies on taurine, and taurine had like a 10% extension, maximum lifespan extension. And taurine and glycine are similar. The problem with glycine and methionine is it only kind of partially makes up for methionine. I mean, glycine is beneficial, right? But it doesn't make up for the methionine. I know there's experiments that people talk about where it's like you just eat glycine and that makes up for the methionine, but it only partially makes up for it.
And the fish oils?
Fish oils are generally rancid. They're not really a natural product. And the evidence that we need omega-3 fats, I don't know if that's really valid. I don't think there's really any evidence to support fish oil and oils in general. It always goes back to the issue with eating fat is that it increases the viscosity of your blood. And this is like obvious to anybody, right? Like fat it thickens a liquid, right? Like if you put fat in something, it's thicker. And, as soon as you consume fat, your blood pressure goes up and your heart has to work harder to pump blood through your body. And the way your blood works is you have red blood cells in your blood, right? That's like 99% in your blood. And the cells in your blood have a negative charge called the zeta potential. And what that means is when red blood cells come together, they're both negatively charged, so they just bounce off each other. And your arteries, the lining of your arteries are also negatively charged, right? So when a red blood cell hits the side of the endothelial cell of your artery, it bounces off of them because they both have a negative charge, okay? Things like cholesterol and fat in general, they have like a positive charge, and they create these things called the rouleau formation, or stack of coins, where your red blood cells, it's like an Oreo cookie. Like the red blood cells are negatively charged and they repel from each other. But when you stick like cholesterol in between them, they stack up and they start agglomerating together, and they create these stack of coin formations. And it increases the viscosity or thickness of your blood. Your heart has to pump harder to push those things through your arteries and your capillaries. And your body, it's just evolved to not consume a lot of fat, and you're better off not absolutely minimizing it. So I can't see, I'm not really aware of any real benefit to consuming fish oil. And I think omega-3s in general, they're like a phantom. They're not really something that's essential.
Okay, now let's go to the core of the cult here, the rice. Now here is my 101 understanding of carbohydrates. So, okay, there are the fast-acting carbohydrates, sugar and whatnot. They are good around exercise, but pretty much that's all. There are the fibrous vegetables and fruits. Even though fruits have sugars, it doesn't seem to matter. So they are pretty much good almost every time. But okay, we have things like bread, potatoes, rice, brown rice, and these and pasta and these kind of things. So for me, those are in the same categories. Even though brown rice is supposed to be healthier than white rice, they don't seem to matter on this understanding, at least. So pitch me why is rice so important? What am I missing here?
Well, I mean, if your goal is to minimize fat, rice is one of the highest carb grains. It's an easy food. That buzzer that went off, it's always available. I can cook it in a pressure cooker, so it's going to be high carb. It's low fat, relatively low protein. So the difference between brown rice and white rice, brown rice is going to have a bit more fiber, right? Because it has the shell and the grains intact. It's going to have a little bit slower of a blood sugar spike, right? White rice will spike your blood sugar a little bit quicker, but and that'll require more insulin, right? So the bigger the blood sugar spike, the more insulin has to be created to push the sugar into your cells. So that's the benefit of whole grains over processed grains like white rice. So it's about it.
Well, why not bread then, if you're after carbs mainly?
Well, bread, that's going to be generally like a processed carb, and it will spike your blood sugar. But bread is a great food too. I do eat bread sometimes. So the problem with bread is you're going to have you ever had bread without salt? That's a little bit tough. Rice, you can kind of choose how much salt you want there. Bread, generally people buy it, and there's a lot of other additional ingredients that they put in there to make it more shelf stable. Rice is cheaper and it lasts longer and it's easier to prepare.
All right. Let's get back to these kind of things later on. I want to ask you something, because you reached out to me on the Longevity World Cup email address, and you were the very first person who reached out to me on that email address. So where did you find it?
That might have been through your YouTube channel, contact information. Forget exactly how I figured it out. I did have a look at the website. I think you're ranking people based off like a pheno-age blood type.
They are AI generated people for now. It didn't start yet.
Yeah. Some of the pheno-age scores, I don't. One thing that's so good about the Rejuvenation Olympics is I think they really make an effort to make that rate of aging score consistent. And I know from the 4 tests that I took that the scores are pretty consistent. When I do things similarly, I get a similar score. Like, it would be really unfortunate if you took the test twice, did the exact same thing, but got different scores, right? Then it's like your scores are kind of there's some amount of, they're kind of arbitrary. But the Dunedin pace, the true diagnostic score seems really consistent, and I think they've made a good effort to make that like an optimal way to measure longevity, based on the science that we have at this point. I don't know if the blood test would be as reliable, but I don't know.
I do think the pinnacle of epigenetic aging clocks is the Dunedin pace.
Yeah.
Now there are two things here. First of all, my strategy with the Longevity World Cup is to change the aging clock every year. Now, this will result in that, epigenetic aging clocks are going to get better. Eventually, we won't have to worry about, averaging multiple tests because they must get better in order for this to be useful for us.
Yeah.
No, but why did I choose one? Because are you familiar with Julie Gibson-Clark?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she cannot afford to compete in the Rejuvenation Olympics anymore because you need 3 tests, and it's arguably good way for her to spend her money to do 3 tests on that, maybe 1 test a year. But this way, if you accept only 1 test, then there are 2 kind of strategies on the extremes. One is that someone who doesn't have a lot of money and someone who has a lot of money. Someone who doesn't have a lot of money, they strategize for me, the best time to take this test is going to be when there is no allergy season and I'm after a fasting period and whatnot. And that's when I'm going to take this test.
Right.
And that's my strategy. Someone who has a lot of money, they're going to do a test every single day, every single hour. So this way, even the rich people can compete with the people who are cost aware. That's the idea, and we'll see how that turns out. What do you think about just the general notion of longevity as a sport?
I think it's fantastic. One problem I have with the Rejuvenation Olympics site is they're really not doing enough, right? Like there's the guy who's number 1. I don't know anything about him. I would love to know more about him, but I don't know anything because they don't really have any content on a lot of the people. I mean, that's one thing I like about Seam Land is he has a lot of information about how he got to where he did. He's shared a lot and made a lot of videos. And the thing that I think is so great about Rejuvenation Olympics is it's like, there's so much talk about longevity from like a million different people on YouTube, but there's no way to quantify the validity of what people are saying. And Rejuvenation Olympics gives you a way to back up what you're saying, right? Like I can tell you right now, everything that I'm telling you will put you at number 20. It won't put you at number 1, but if you do what I did, you have a chance at being around number 20, right? If I come up with some other advice, and I don't have the test to back it up, you have no way of knowing the value of what I'm saying. It's very hard. Like you can't say, well, there's these scientific experiments backing up what I say, because even there, the science, it's hard to really pin down the ideal way to do things. I mean, I've been telling you, you should do high carb. There's a lot of low carb people that would have tons of evidence saying that low carb is the way to go, right? And so the only way to really have any kind of evidence or support to what you're saying are the tests, right? Are the scores that you get. And so, that's why I love your channel, because you have people who are doing well in the Rejuvenation Olympics, and they're sharing what they're doing to get there. And you can take a lot away from that. And people like, I don't know if you know Michael Lustgarten, he's someone who has like a very popular YouTube channel, and he has posted his scores. So you know where he's at, right? It's not like he's just all talk and unsupported advice. He's taken the scores and posted them. So you know if you follow his advice, you have some expectation of what your scores will be. So I think all of that is it's very positive, right? Progress to figure out what's the way to maximize longevity. It's when people, post their scores and you know what went into getting those scores. I just think the whole thing is very positive.
Yeah, I agree. The scores are the most important thing here, because there are two sports. Let's call them sports. One is bodybuilding, the other is street workout. In bodybuilding, what happened is that the bigger your muscles were, the better you did in the competitions. Now this has got to a point where now the bigger muscles are the muscles are so big, the monster era of bodybuilding where we are right now, that there is a value capture going on, and now it's they introduce stuff like classic physique and whatnot. So the sport is kind of dying because the metric that they had is not good enough anymore because people over optimized on it. But the other extreme is the street workout stuff, which is, I grew up in Eastern Europe, or middle of Central Europe, and I did not have money for gym membership. So a lot of people were like that. So what did we do? We went to parks and started working out in the parks and streets and wherever we could. And that was great. I loved it. But ultimately, we couldn't make it a sport out of it because we never found the metric that we could pursue there. The closest things were, there was a time when the gymnasts came in and show us that, hey, you guys are nowhere. You guys can't do anything. But even gymnastics is a beauty context, right? Like the nicer you move, it's very subjective. But here in the Rejuvenation Olympics and longevity sport, we are developing these biological aging clocks. And now that's a strong foundation of a sport. So I'm excited about it.
The prize is that you get to live longer. That's a pretty good reward.
It's best reward. There is no other sport that has better reward than that. Like literally.
And it's not even just living longer. It's just feeling better, in your body. Reducing illness, reducing pain. So there are drawbacks to the Rejuvenation Olympics, though. And can I share a couple of those?
Yes, please.
Most people are not competing in the Rejuvenation Olympics, and they have no interest in anything that you're doing. And you do kind of, you kind of exclude yourself from a lot of things, right? Like if you want to be really serious about your health, you're going to have to eat a particular way, right? And that's going to make kind of social engagements very difficult, right? Like if everyone's eating a certain way that's very unhealthy, you're kind of excluded from that. So it's very hard for me to eat with anyone ever, right? Like any kind of meal I have with other people is going to be a compromise to a certain extent, right? And a big problem with competing in the Rejuvenation Olympics is the more exceptions and compromises you make, the lower your, that's going to affect your scores, right? So you got to be extreme as far as, again, my opinion, you have to be extreme in your approach to diet, right? Like you can't make a lot of exceptions. Like you can't have a lot of cheat meals, right? And any meal that I have, like, Christmas, that was a cheat day, right? I didn't really maintain the standards that I normally maintain on Christmas. Anytime I have a meal with other people, it ends up being a compromise to how I compete in the Rejuvenation Olympics. The other thing is, whenever you do calorie restriction, like I look like a freak, right? Like somebody like Seamland and Brian Johnson, I mean, it's great. They look so healthy and they're very muscular. My approach has been to do calorie restriction. And so, I mean, I weigh like 125 pounds. When people see me, they think I just look like there's something wrong with me. So that's tough. I get a lot of questions about my weight. I get a lot of questions about the food that I eat. So there are difficulties with it. There are social difficulties to competing in the Olympics. What you're doing, it's so different than how people normally live. It doesn't fit. And it's hard to fit in with other people.
So just for the listeners, 125 pounds is approximately 56.7 kilograms.
Yeah.
Now, I want to note that why I like you, why I liked your channel is because there are more and more people like that, but you're one of the very first people who take this sport seriously. Michael Lustgarten is someone else, but many people I talk to, they like, okay, this is just a side thing, but some people really care about it, and that's
yeah. The reason why I think it's so important is because the benefits are so gigantic, right?
Your benefits or the global benefits?
Well, I mean, anyone who kind of engages in this practice, right? Because my personal belief is there's no way I'm going to get cancer. I just cannot imagine how it's possible. And there's no way that I'm going to deal with any of the issues of heart disease. And I mean, I love life. I love being healthy and enjoying life. And I want to enjoy it for as long as possible. And there's an enormous amount of science or, experience that people have that are saying, hey, it's not that hard to enjoy an incredibly healthy lifestyle. You can be healthy. You don't have to deal with cancer. You don't have to deal with heart disease. You don't have to deal with dementia, right? And these things they're just freely available. All you have to do is start practicing some basic things. And, like you have to eat whole grains, eat some vegetables, do some walking, restrict your calories a little bit, and you're going to have enormous health benefits. And I don't know, like if people really generally believe that or understand that. And a lot of people I see are dealing with heart disease, and they go to doctors, and the advice they get is really not very good. And I just don't know if people really understand how easy it is to be incredibly healthy and to add like 20 or 30 years to your lifespan just by doing like basic, simple things. So that's all pretty incredible to me. I don't know why more people aren't doing what I'm doing and other, rejuvenation athletes. But Brian Johnson is changing a lot of this because he's kind of putting such a positive, like life affirming spin on, the don't die. And, he's just really such an ambassador for the whole movement.
So why not everyone is doing this? I think almost everyone have tried to, let's say, a vice-free, fine and nutrition, some exercise life at one point in their lives. I am one of the people who are trying this every month. I'm trying hard and stuff, and I'm doing more and more progress. But then life happens, life always happens and puts you completely off track. So is that not the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, maybe Brian Johnson doesn't have this because he's got his whole life kind of wrapped, centered on this kind of don't die approach. But Yeah, I mean, like I said, at Christmas, ended up being a day where I made some exceptions, but you get right back on the horse. You get right back to it. You accept that you're gonna have some, mistakes, and you're gonna make some exceptions to your plan, but you stick to the plan. And for me, one thing I do that's been very helpful. Have you ever heard of this site Chronometer, or just any site where
Yes,
you?
I used it for coffee. I just stopped this week, actually.
Yeah, I would say Chronometer is like a fantastic tool. Just because, so I'm gonna seem a little crazy here, but I've been weighing all of my food, all of it, for about 8 years, and entering my food every single day into Chronometer for about 8 years. And there's a lot of good things about that. I can always go back and see like what I was eating, how that affected the past scores that I had in True Diagnostic. Um, but I always kind of plan out what I'm going to eat every single day, down to the calorie. And I basically eat very similar, aside from days where I make exceptions like Christmas, but generally every single day I'm eating very similar. It's like white rice. I generally I eat 2 meals a day, white rice in the morning and brown rice in the afternoon. And I weigh it out, and I don't really think a lot about what I'm eating. I never eat a meal. When I eat a meal, it's just, I've weighed it out. I put it in a bowl. I eat the entire bowl, and then that's the end of the meal. There's no decision like, well, am I still hungry? It's just everything is planned out that I eat. And that's a great way to kind of make small improvements over time and just kind of get into like routines. Like my life, it's very monotonous. I do the same thing. I mean, I enjoy my life, but it's very routine. I do a lot of the same things every day. I try and make small improvements over time. And that's worked pretty well for me. It doesn't, it's easier. It's not that hard. But the foundation is I weigh all my food and record it in Chronometer.
What obstacles did you encounter that challenged your good routines?
When you start doing things that make you feel well, I had health challenges from the beginning. And, I first started eating vegan back in 2012. And I just had a lot of health improvements when I started doing things better for my, practicing things that are good and cutting out things that are bad. So like drinking alcohol, that's something you absolutely have to cut out. But when you do things that are good, you feel good. And, then it's like, it's not an obstacle. Like everybody wants to feel good. And so things that, kind of maybe addictions that you have to things that are bad, they really lose their appeal when you kind of equate them with feeling bad. Like, it's great to be addicted. Like, I like walking. I used to do some jogging. These things, I feel good doing them. It kind of, you just want to do more of the things that make you feel good and less of the things that are bad for you. And I have a very stable, I'm married, I'm happily married. I have a stable family life. I don't have a lot of like social distractions that pull me into negative practices, right? Like I don't have friends that want to go out drinking, so just my normal routine is health promoting, and just stable. It's kind of what you want to get into.
Tell me about the family part. So my experience is that when a man makes his own family, a new family, his life comes together, and he's much more into his routines and stuff. But on the other hand, he cannot really take his health aspirations to its extreme because other human autonomous beings are around you. Those are constantly interrupting, and you were a software developer, or you are a software developer, and imagine that family interrupts you at the time writing code. So how's that working out for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act, right? But all in all, family gives you stability, and that's pretty valuable. So I think that makes up for whatever difficult. I mean, being a parent, I have two children, son and daughter, who are they're in their early 20s now. They're 21 and 22. So that can be stressful, but being a parent is rewarding. Having a good marriage is very rewarding. And even with Rejuvenation Olympics, even if you kind of nail down all of the dietary stuff and the exercise stuff, you still have to have your mind right? And so you have to have a stable mental approach to the whole thing, and that comes from having a stable family life and having a good spiritual practice. Something that's going to give your life meaning. And I think you have to have a good family life to really optimize that part of the challenge.
What gives your life meaning?
Well, that's a really tough one. I think part of it is spiritual. You do have to have some relationship with God. You have to have some approach towards morality, right? It's very fulfilling for me to tell you I live a moral life. I have my issues and my flaws like everybody else, but trying to live a moral life is a very fulfilling thing. Trying to have a relationship with the creator of the universe, that's very meaningful. Having family and loved ones, you get meaning from that, but it's tough. It's something everybody's got to figure out on their own.
How did you get here? What's the story? What's your story?
Yeah, I lived in New Jersey my whole life, and I've been a programmer for almost 35 years now. And that's kind of given me, being a programmer, that's kind of it's a very analytical job, and so I kind of develop like an analytical approach to life through being a programmer. And you turn the lens on yourself and start analyzing your own life and how you live. When you develop I developed large software systems for a large corporation here in America. And the idea is you're always optimizing the system, right? You're always making little improvements to the software to make it run better as a whole. And, I kind of do the same thing with my own life. I just kind of always try and optimize things. And sometimes I make changes that, are a setback. And so you kind of correct the problem and make course adjustments. But that's kind of the way I live my whole life. It's just kind of trying to make optimizations and fix things that are wrong and try and make small improvements.
You still write code?
Yeah, I do.
Do AI change the way that you write code?
Definitely. So, now with AI, you can ask AI to write sections of code for you. So, for example, if I wanted to back up a database, I can just go to Gemini or Llama and say, hey, write this section of code for me, and it'll just give me the code. So AI definitely has a major impact on coding.
Yeah. I got the same. I am a software developer, and but there was like a year or two, and my company grew too big, so I couldn't get to code anymore. Okay. And that year or 2 or 3 year was when ChatGPT came out. And now that I changed course and started working on the Longevity World Cup code again, and I never wrote a website before. I never worked in JavaScript and this kind of stuff. But I just realized that it doesn't matter anymore. With AI, I don't have to look up the references and whatnot. It just tells me what to do, and I do it, and I spot the error quickly, right? Because I can still read the code even if I'm not familiar with the syntax, and it made me a 100x programmer, right? I probably was a 10x, but AI just made me so much better. It's great.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's an incredible tool. So, you know, if you understand how to use it, I mean, it's an incredible tool for longevity because so you could go to AI right now, and if you have some vague notion about some experiment that you read about, you know, but you can't remember the details, you can just go to AI and it will instantaneously give you everything, right? So it's pretty incredible. It's definitely gonna advance, you know, human beings, you know, knowledge, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
gonna be our slave until they enslave us. Back to a little bit on your routines. You talked about your diets. You did not talk about your supplements.
I don't do a lot of supplementation. I do have certain things that I'm interested in, and I do supplement with methylene blue. I have done some supplementation with rapamycin. Have you talked to anybody who supplemented rapamycin?
Just Dave Pascal.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is evidence for that. That's kind of an mTOR inhibitor. It's like a protein restriction mimetic, similar to restricting protein. Rapamycin may also have antiviral effects. Have you talked with anyone who's the idea of suppressing viruses and, you know, relation between viruses and aging?
No, I did not. I wanted to ask you about that. I saw that you're taking antivirals. Like, what's that even
Yeah.
about?
So I don't know if you listen to Michael Lustgarten had a great interview with Amy. I forget her last name. Aging is related to viral burdens, right? Like Seam Land mentioned suppression of inflammation, and viruses increase inflammation, and your body is loaded with viruses, right? Like you just, you know, there's kind of like this kind of viral theory of aging where the viruses that you get exposed to throughout your life, that's what causes you to age. And anything you can do to suppress viruses are going to be beneficial for longevity. And this is one reason why things like, I don't know if you've ever watched nutritionfacts.org. It's this guy, Michael Greger, and he talks a lot about what vegetables are most longevity enhancing. And one of the best vegetables you can ever eat is garlic, by far. And garlic is kind of like a virus suppressing vegetable food, right? It's going to suppress viruses in your body. Yeah, Michael Lustgarten, he's got a great talk about that. Just suppressing viruses it's like another thing that you can do. The idea with doing a lot of supplementation and diet for longevity, your body breaks down in so many different ways, right? It's like, you know, having heart disease, it causes aging. You know, inflammation causes aging. You know, exposure to radiation causes aging. Exposure to estrogenic chemicals, right, in the environment, toxic chemicals in the environment causes aging. Exposure to microplastics causes aging, right? Like there's so many different things that have a negative effect on your body. Like your body is always breaking down in like a million different ways, right? It's not like just one thing. Like if we could just stop this one thing, then that would fix everything. It's like a million different ways that your body is breaking down, right? Like your ability to even sense that you're thirsty, that declines with aging, right? Like to know whether or not you're thirsty, as you get older, it gets harder to realize that, right? So, I mean, your production of glutathione, master antioxidant. Everything that's beneficial declines with aging. So you've got to do a lot of different things to combat aging. Like it can't just be one thing. It's got to be like 100 different approaches. So for example, like you want to reduce the amount of viruses that are in your body. Everything that we said about eating high carb and keeping cholesterol low, keeping blood pressure low. But then you also want to optimize beneficial hormones, right? So there's ways that you can do that. Like you want to maintain a reasonably high testosterone level, and you want to maintain high level of pregnenolone and DHEA and all the youthful hormones that are declining as you age. So I would say that's another avenue to look into is how do you maintain youthful hormones? Because there are researchers that have gotten a lot of good longevity results. Like there's this guy, Greg Fahey, Fahy, who did an experiment where he used DHEA, growth hormone, and metformin and got like a significant life extension, right? DHEA, that's one of these hormones that decline during aging. So there's a lot of different approaches to longevity, and you have to, address all of them.
That's right. What about exercise? You don't seem to be big on that, or?
Well, I think it's good, but I do a lot of walking and I do some exercise. Anything that gets extreme, it just gets to be, you just end up having to consume more calories. It just increases your calorie needs. And I'm not sure there's a huge benefit beyond walking, right? So you definitely have to get exercise. And so, I walk every day, and you want to walk, probably at least an hour a day is probably beneficial. But I think if you start getting like the temptation with exercise is to always do more and get bigger and stronger and go longer and go faster. And I know when I was running, I always wanted to run faster and longer and, more often. And I would always end up pushing it until I got injured. And I have a feeling that's the norm. People always overdo it until they get injured. And, a big part of longevity is avoiding injury. So I would think, a modest amount of exercise is ideal. That's my take on it.
Injury was a normal part of my life as well when I was obsessive athlete. There was a time maybe 5 years ago when I created a workout principle to myself. Be a pussy. You don't wanna mess up yourself. Like that's not the point. And I'm not getting injured anymore. So that's good. Yeah. What about sleep? Do you track your sleep and do you even pay attention to it? You don't really talk about that in your videos.
Yeah, well, I know for Brian Johnson, like he's always talking about how important sleep is. I think your body, well, let me put it this way. When you restrict your calories, you sleep less, right? I mean, you sleep less, absolutely. If you do, people who do fasting, like they have trouble sleeping at all. So, I think, I don't know. I think sleep is kind of overrated. I think if you can get 6 hours a night, 7 hours, if you get 7 hours a night, I mean, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think it's important to go to sleep at the same time every night, but I mean, like I wake up pretty early and I never sleep more than 7 hours a night, never.
Okay. Well, you get the basics right, because there are people, even there was a time in my 20s for 10 years, I have traveled around the world and I got to a sleeping schedule that I went to sleep whenever I went to sleep and I get up whenever I got up. And I noticed I started to, like, sometimes I go to sleep at 5 p.m. The next day I go to sleep at 7 p.m. The next day at 9 p.m. And it's like there was a time when I was going to sleep like 10 a.m. in the morning, because and
So that's not going to work for longevity, because you have to maintain a circadian rhythm, right? Like you have cortisol, and cortisol basically dictates when you need to go to sleep and when you need to wake up, and it should be the same time every single day. And just a couple of things related to that. I mean, if you want to maximize longevity, you have to eat the majority of your calories as early in the day as possible, because your body is kind of optimized to digest food early in the morning. You don't want to eat food late at night. Your body is more insulin sensitive in the morning. So you want to eat the majority of your calories before noon, right? Your biggest meal should be in the morning. And you want to have some amount of intermittent fasting each day. So you want to finish your food. I try and finish my food by like 2 p.m., don't eat after 2 p.m. And so you want to have some amount of intermittent fasting, just because you want to have some period each day where you're not digesting food, right? Your blood sugar is lower, and your body has some repair time instead of just digesting all day. And so if you're following a schedule where you're going to sleep at different times during the day, that's not going to be good for longevity. You have to maintain a set schedule, go to sleep the same time every single day.
Yeah, it messed me up, man. Seriously.
Yeah, when you're young, like, maybe when you're, but as you get older, it's not a good thing. And then the other key thing is you want to eat the majority of your calories early, because your body is more able to respond to insulin in the morning.
Okay, and what about gadgets, high-tech stuff, or extra stuff like, I know, cold plunges? Do you do something crazy?
Not really. My wife does she does cold showers, but when you're as thin as I am, you don't want to do anything like that. I'm not really aware of any extreme stuff that's really beneficial. I mean, if I told people the amount of calories, they would consider that extreme, very extreme. I think probably people do a lot more cold plunging than they do calorie restriction. There's not a lot of people doing calorie restriction. I thought I'd see more people doing calorie restriction on your channel, and
Yeah, I think so.
I haven't seen as many as I thought, because to me, this is really the only way to really get a great score. I mean, just to fill out the detail a little bit, I took 4 tests, and when I took the third test, I'm doing around 1,800 calories now. But when I did the 4th test, I'm like, I got to really see what I can do with calorie restriction. And I did 1,500 calories a day for a few months. And it didn't have a huge impact on my score. It went from 0.73 to 0.72. But it was so difficult. I lost a lot of weight. One reason I'm at the weight I'm at now is because I did so much calorie restriction for those 3 months, just to see, how much I could optimize the score. So that was pretty extreme, what I was doing at that point. It wasn't really sustainable either. Where now 1,800, 1,900 calories a day, I can maintain my current weight and, have energy and not really suffer from the cold as much. Like, one problem with calorie restriction is it's very difficult to deal with winter. Cold temperatures are very difficult because your body temperature is a little bit lower, right? Your metabolism is suppressed a little bit. So that was pretty extreme, and something I don't think I would ever go back and do again, just because there wasn't really as much benefit as I thought I would get from it. But
Well, you can do the cold plunge then. I mean, I was always cold and stuff. I really hated cold. And then I got myself, okay, I'm gonna do the cold plunges. And I really didn't notice any other benefits. Only this. I'm not cold anymore. Like, I'm not cold. I can tolerate cold. So at least it can help with that.
yeah.
Yeah, the reason why people do more cold plunges than calorie restriction is because calorie restriction is hard. Cold plunges are easy in relative terms. So people are much more willing to go through an extreme amount of pain if it's short time, than to suffer for a very long period of time, right? And that's calorie restriction.
I think, I mean, if I was going to try and convince somebody to take up calorie restriction, I think the way I would describe it is, I mean, it is difficult to kind of limit your calories, right? But once you get into the routine of it, your body it takes on this feeling of just complete ease. You're completely at ease. You do get a feeling of extreme health. Like it's really hard to describe, but your body just has like it's very comfortable and very light. You do have this feeling of lightness that you cannot get that any other way other than through calorie restriction. And your body does adapt to the lower amount of calories, right? You get very thin, right? But I eat 1,800 calories a day, and I have more than enough energy to do whatever I want to do, right? Like I can't do, if I had to do a huge amount of work, I would need more calories. But for normal life as a programmer, I always have enough energy, and I have a lightness that's, it's hard to describe, but it is a healthy feeling.
What's one thing that you strongly believe to be the case, but very few people agree with you on?
So I knew you were going to ask this question. So I thought about it beforehand. And what I would say is don't go to the doctor unless you're bleeding or unless you have a broken bone. Don't go. Don't get pre-screened. Don't get, an annual physical. Don't do it, because almost everything that they do is not going to help you. It's going to hurt you. Don't get a colonoscopy. Don't get a mammogram. Don't have your prostate checked, because there's no benefit from having those things done. Just work on your diet, do some walking, eat some brown rice. Don't go to the doctor.
I actually want to ask more about that. So on the beginning, I agree with that. The medical enterprise is failing big time, but you go a couple of steps further, like don't get your prostate checked, don't get pre-screened. Like, where does this coming from?
Well, there's a book called The Great Prostate Hoax. It was written by the person that discovered the PSA test, right? Prostate specific antigen, right? And that's something that they measure to decide whether or not to give you a prostate biopsy. And he said it's unreliable. And the other thing with prostate cancer is generally almost always very slow growing, right? So most men, if they live into their 80s, they have prostate cancer, but it's slow growing, right? So it's almost always better with the prostate to do nothing, right? But that's not good for, doctors who treat prostate cancer and hospitals that have invested, millions of dollars in these kind of robotic systems to do prostate removal. And so doctors always want to push you towards treatment. And prostate cancer should almost always not be treated because it's such a slow growing cancer, right? So you're better off not doing anything with your prostate. You may die, right? Some people will die by not having their prostate removed, but they're the vast minority. Most people that have their prostate removed never would have died from prostate cancer. And when they compare populations, they've done these experiments already. They take 1,000 men and they don't get any PSA tests and they don't get any prostate biopsies or prostate removals or chemotherapy. They do nothing, and they live to be a certain age. And they take another group of people and they give them all of this medical treatment that results in impotence and incontinence, right? You have to wear diapers for the rest of your life. And the people that undergo all that treatment, they have no longevity benefit at all. They don't live longer by undergoing all of those treatments. But the difference is they have to deal with all the side effects and all the compromises that come from all these medical treatments, but they don't get any longevity benefit. And mammograms are the same way. Colonoscopies are the same way. There's no longevity benefit from having these medical procedures. So you're better off not doing it.
Let's move on to the evil capitalist question. I believe you're familiar with that as well. Is there any way for people to buy goods and services from you?
No, yeah, I'm just sharing the knowledge here. This is it.
Not even freelancing programming, something like that?
No, I would like to, I have made more YouTube videos in the past, and I may try and do more, as I feel the need with longevity topics, but that would be about it.
Well, Barry Robbins, thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
You're an oddball just like me.
Yeah.
Stay light.
Thank you to you. Thank you to you for everything that you're doing with this channel. I think it's a lot of good can come out of it, and I think you have a lot more that you can do. There's a lot of potential in what you're doing, and it's not like there's 1,000 people with longevity channels, similar to what you're doing. It's like a unique niche that I think has some potential.
All right. And you're welcome to compete in the Longevity World Cup 2025.
Yeah, I got to get another blood test score, and then I'll post it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much.